I'm Margaret Cole, 64, a retired English teacher, and tonight I learned my place in my own family. Funeral flowers were still wet when Samantha, my son Daniel's widow, tightened her jaw at the attorney's table for the reading of the will. The house and $17 million go to Mrs. Samantha Cole. Mr. Alden said, voice even, like he was dividing paper clips. My name followed as an afterthought, a hunting cabin on the back 40 and whatever memories I could carry. I watched the black ribbon on Daniel's photograph blur and steady. Samantha didn't reach for me. She slid a glossy key across the table, not the house key, but one to a rusted padlock. "You'll be comfortable there," she said, smiling without her eyes. When I stood to leave, she leaned close enough for her perfume to sting my throat. "Go live with the pigs." Outside, rain thinned to a shiny mist. I waited to wake in my bed, to hear Daniel say "Mom" from the kitchen like he was 20 again. Instead, the sky kept sinking, and the cabin waited like a dare. I tucked the key into my coat and walked to the car, anger firming my steps the way grief loosened my lungs. The road bent toward the trees, and I followed because pride wouldn't let me crawl. The church parking lot had emptied by the time I eased my sedan onto the county road, headlights stitched across ditches swollen with rain. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on my purse, as if Samantha might reach from the dark and take the photograph of Daniel at 7, freckles bright across his nose. Grief arrived in waves I could not schedule and went silent when the radio tried a hymn. The cabin sat at the far edge of land Daniel had hunted with his father, a weathered box with a pitched roof and a porch that sagged toward the wet ground. The lock gave after 2 tries. Damp, mice, and cedar hit my face in one breath. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and swept the beam across a narrow bed, an iron stove, hooks for coats, a crooked frame holding a county map with old names. Someone had left a broom. I used it like a penitent, pushing leaves and grit into a pile until my hands steadied. Daniel had loved this land. He'd bring me here in the fall, hand me a thermos, and narrate the woods like a tour guide. We argued once about the way he worked too much. He laughed, called me old-fashioned, promised he was saving for a future. I didn't imagine that future would hang on a sentence read in an office while his widow watched me with a smile sharpened by money. A truck passed on the road below. The cabin swallowed the sound. I set my purse on the table and unfolded the paper Mr. Alden had given me, a summary of bequests, neat as receipts. Samantha's hall lay in black ink, the house, accounts, investments, items described by numbers I recognized but couldn't hold. My portion was 3 lines long, ending with a parcel number like a serial tag. I let the paper lie flat and made tea on the iron stove with a camping kettle. Steam fogged my glasses and warmed my nose. There is a point when fury clarifies the room. Mine focused on surviving the night without calling Daniel's name into the dark. I opened the window an inch. Cold autumn air slid in, smelling like wet bark and something metallic. A single idea arrived, simple as a grocery list. Tomorrow I would explore every inch of what I had left. That night, morning arrived slow and gray. I washed a mug in the shallow sink and listened to the cabin shift around me, wood easing after a wet night. On the porch, the world held its breath. Deer tracks stitched the mud. A hawk circled the tree line. I started with the obvious, what a teacher does on a first day, take inventory. The hooks held nothing. The bed hid a jar of nails and a pocket knife with coal etched on the handle. In the stove sat a folded note so stained I had to breathe on it. Daniel's handwriting. My throat closed. It wasn't a message, just a list of chores, caulk windows, check roof line, clean flue. I kept the paper folded tight. Behind the map on the wall, a nail squeaked. I levered the frame free and found a shallow niche where someone had once hidden a flare gun and a small ledger. The ledger was my husband's, G. Cole. Firm on the first page, he'd tracked maintenance, fuel, even tomato yields. Near the back, a different hand noted mineral rights beyond the creek, survey markers, a company acronym, a number too big for repairs. I felt the first edge of suspicion cut clean through my grief. By noon, I drove into town, the ledger in my bag, to a bank where nobody knew me. A young teller directed me to a vault room when I slid Daniel's small brass key across the counter. The box clicked open to envelopes labeled in my son's print. I read standing up, lab reports, bank statements, photographs of Samantha at dinners with men whose smiles didn't reach their eyes, weighted in a stack, a flash drive taped to the lid with blue painter's tape. At the bottom lay a letter to me. Mom, it began. I hope I'm wrong, but if you're reading this, I'm not. I think Samantha is poisoning me. I can't prove it yet. I'm working with people who can help. Please keep this safe and call Sheriff Dixon if anything happens. Don't confront her alone. Trust your instincts. They're better than mine. The room spun and steadied. Outside, traffic moved. I put the flash drive in my pocket like a talisman and walked into a day that had just changed its name. I drove straight to Sheriff Harold Dixon's office because the letter told me to, and because I trusted the past more than the present. The county building smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. Dixon met me at the door with the same careful smile he wore when my husband broke his wrist on a ladder. He poured coffee into a paper cup and gestured to the chair by the wall map. I showed him the letter, the reports, the photographs, the flash drive. He didn't touch anything at first, only read, lips moving slightly, then reached for gloves and nodded. Margaret, he said low, you did the right thing bringing this to me. I'm going to have to make a call. He stepped into the hallway. I studied the county like a lost person. Creeks, roads, farm names I'd known since PTA bake sales. He returned with a woman in a navy jacket and calm eyes. Agent Rivera, he said. FBI. She introduced herself with a grip. Mrs. Cole, your son reached out months ago, she said. We opened an investigation, but we needed corroboration. What you've brought is significant. We're close to probable cause on several crimes, financial and otherwise. A door inside me opened on the word otherwise. Rivera continued. We'll take custody of the materials today. We'll log them and give you copies. You can help us by going about your routine. Don't tip Samantha. Don't confront her. If she contacts you, be polite, be consistent, and tell Sheriff Dixon we'll be nearby. I let out a breath I'd been holding since the memorial. What happens next? I asked. We listen, Rivera said. We document. And when she shows us who she is, we already have the camera running. On the way out, Dixon walked me to the steps. He fixed his hat and tried for lightness. You still making that lemon pound cake? I told him I hadn't baked since spring. Then start a new loaf, he said. It'll give your hands something to do. The day didn't brighten, but its corners sharpened. Back at the cabin, I cleaned the stovepipe and opened windows to trade damp air for colder, cleaner air. I wrote Daniel's name on a slip of paper and put it in my pocket for the wait, before sunset. A black SUV eased past on the road, unhurried, like it had taken a wrong turn. I wished it courage and locked my door. Samantha called the next morning, bright. She asked how I was settling in and whether I needed help with the cabin, her voice trimmed by etiquette. I thanked her and said I would manage. The pause that followed stretched. Wonderful, she said. Then if you'd sign a quick paper for me, small thing about an easement, my developer can swing by this afternoon. I told her I'd be here. I told Dixon too. He answered on the first ring and said, we'll be nearby. I made the place look like life might happen. washed the mug, stacked kindling, shook out the quilt. By 3, a black pickup rolled into the clearing, chrome flashing. A heavy man in a branded vest stepped out with a clipboard and a smile that didn't connect to anything behind his eyes. He introduced himself as Carson from Northridge Development and held out a document that looked official and spoke in smooth sentences. He said the company could take the troublesome land and give me a generous check, $75,000 today. He said market conditions, taxes, soil concerns. I said I'd like my attorney to read it. Carson's smile thinned to a line. He tapped a line with a capped pen. Everyone did these deals now, he said. I photographed each page with my phone as if my hands were clumsy. He asked whether Samantha might drop by to help me understand the terms. I said I'd prefer to read in quiet. He left his card and a deadline, then drove away, slow. At dusk, Samantha arrived in a cream coat, heels clean. She set 2 to-go coffees on the table like offerings. She kept her coat on. A toast, she said, with a half laugh that scratched. I lifted the lid. No cream, no sugar, just black. The air tightened. I asked a question about the easement to keep her talking and placed my cup by the window. She began to explain in her checkout counter tone. I listened, nodding, letting my phone on the shelf record the room. I told her I wouldn't sign anything until my attorney reviewed it, and I watched a flicker across her face, quick as a fish turning under a dock. The coffee steamed between us, untouched. She kept talking, circling the easement. I nodded and made a show of reading the developer's card. The edges held a smear from rain. I asked simple questions. How long would trucks use the road? Who would fix the culvert? Why the rush with tests pending? She breezed through memorized answers. I pictured the flash drive in my pocket. When she lifted her cup and sipped, I watched her mouth the way I had when Daniel was a toddler. She set the cup down and nudged mine closer, careless as a cat with a glass on a ledge. I slid it back by the window. You never liked me, she said suddenly. You never liked how I make decisions. I liked the way you looked at my son when you married him, I said. I liked that you two built a life. A life that could have been more if he'd only listened, she said lightly. The door eased open. Sheriff Dixon stepped into the porch shadow, hat low, and knocked on the jamb. I called, "Just a minute," and Samantha's eyes cut toward the noise, smoothed. "We're busy," she said, loudly enough for the door to hear. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it. Screen down. "I'm not selling," I said, letting my voice open the space. Samantha tilted her head. "You'll want to. That cabin costs money. You can't keep up with it." "I raised a son on a teacher's salary," I said. "I can keep a roof up." She smiled, but it didn't reach her cheeks. "We'll talk again," she said. "The market won't wait." She drank deeper. Her ring clicked against the table. "I'll have Carson bring a revised offer." "Bring a lawyer," I said. She stood and smoothed her coat. "Why stir trouble, Margaret? You have the cabin. That's plenty for a woman your age." I let the insult land. Dixon stepped fully into view just as she reached the porch. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am?" Samantha's face reset in a single blink. "Sheriff," she said, "we were just visiting." "Enjoy your visit," he said. "Road gets slick at dark." She left with a sweetness that hurt my teeth. The cabin felt larger after the engine faded. I poured both coffees into the sink and watched the dark liquid spiral. It smelled ordinary and looked harmless. Some poisons borrow the disguise of what you trust. I scrubbed the mugs and set them to dry. Then I placed my phone face up on the table and pressed play. The recording caught our voices clean, the impatience in hers, the clink when she nudged my cup. I kept my breathing level and asked her to explain the environmental assessment clause. She rolled the word and delivered an answer that named everything except truth. Tell me about Daniel, I said. Those last months? He was tired, she said. Headaches, stomach trouble. He thought I nagged. He was wrong. She lifted her cup. Sometimes people need help making decisions. I thought of the lab reports and the photographs of her laughing beside men who smiled past the camera. You helped him? I protected his assets. Outside, a car door closed. You should drink your coffee, she said. I'm calm, I answered. Sign the easement. Take a cashier's check. Leave the mineral rights to professionals. I don't sign papers I don't understand. She smiled too widely. You understand. You just don't like the part where I win. My chest tightened with relief, like a door clicking open. The seam of light under the door, the hum of the small refrigerator, the phone on the shelf. I saw it all at once. I don't like the part where my son died, I said. Her face shifted like a mask slipping. He was weak, she said. He wouldn't keep up. A taste like pennies rose. I hadn't sipped, but steam from her cup reached me. You need to go, I said. Not until you sign. She drew a heavy pen. Put it away. She leaned closer. Daniel begged me to handle things. He said you'd cling to sentiment. You're recording, she added, eyes flicking to the shelf. I said nothing. She reached for her phone and, in the same motion, for my cup. I caught her wrist. The cup tipped, splashing a dark crescent. The door opened and Dixon stepped inside with Agent Rivera. Good afternoon, he said. We'll take it from here, Rivera said, eyes on the cups and paper. She set a recorder on the table. Ms. Cole, would you repeat what you said about decisions? Samantha folded her arms. Rivera read a line and asked a new question. Dixon stood by the door like a boulder. My hands trembled. The room brightened. Sit, Dixon said. I sat. A tech entered, gloved, and sealed the cups in bags. We'll need you checked at the hospital, Rivera said. I didn't drink. Steam can carry enough. In the doorway, light showed dust spiraling. I realized I'd braced to hear the truth. Rivera glanced at my phone and nodded, as if to say I hadn't imagined it. The relief stung. Outside, rain and birch leaves and faint wood smoke felt like permission. The ER doctor ordered tests without fuss. Nurses placed an IV, drew vials, spoke in a steady rhythm. Samantha's coffee stayed sealed in a clear bag on a metal tray beside the wall. Agent Rivera waited with a clipboard and the calm of a long road. We'll know more by morning, the doctor said. For now, rest. I rested like on a red-eye flight, eyes closed, mind awake, inventorying a life. I watched Daniel at 7 with a stick for a sword, at 12 with skinned knees and a coding book, at 20 with heartbreak and a plan. I watched Samantha tilt her head, angling light. Near dawn, Dixon arrived with coffee that tasted like cardboard and comfort. Carson is talking. He doesn't want federal time. Rivera joined us. Your son left a longer trail than he realized, she said. Financial manipulation, forged documents, controlled substances. The recording helps. I asked the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Was he right? Rivera didn't flinch. We believe so. We're moving on her. By afternoon, a magistrate signed papers with a pen that scratched. Officers moved with patience and loved forms and log numbers. It reassured me more than I expected. Samantha was arrested at home, a face of polite surprise fixed for company. Photographers caught the cuffs, sites padded headlines. I turned off the television and watched the birch outside the window flex in a clean wind. In interview, she asked for an attorney and water. She asked to start over. Rivera let silence sit until it did the work of a paragraph. Carson's lawyer called to cooperate. A pharmacist decided his license mattered more than a promise. Bit by bit, bricks in a wall loosened. That evening, Dixon rested his elbows on the foot of my bed like a relative at a vigil. "He did right leaving you the key," he said. He knew who would listen. I held the edge of the blanket and didn't cry. Sometimes not crying is how you honor what was endangered and is, for a moment, safe again. The hospital room hummed with machines. Winter arrived politely, with frost first and then broom-soft snow. My tests came back clean. The doctor explained thresholds and exposure, and I listened, grateful for margins. Rivera called with updates I could hold in one hand, indictments, Carson's plea, a pharmacist telling the full story. Samantha's attorney filed motions that folded fast. In February, I sat in a courtroom that smelled of dust and winter coats. Samantha wore gray and looked smaller without her ambitions. The prosecutor laid out timelines and money trails. Toxicology slid into evidence like a final puzzle piece. Video from my phone played. I kept my eyes on the judge's pen. When the verdict came, the room didn't gasp. It exhaled. I walked out into air with the brittle promise of late winter sun. Dixon stood by the steps with his hat in his hands. He didn't say, "I told you so." He said, "You did right." "Margaret." Rivera shook my hand. "Your son gave you the key," she said. "You turned it." I sold the mineral rights in April after pages of questions and a lawyer who explained every line twice. The number wired to my account would have made me dizzy a year earlier. I didn't want to be dizzy. I wanted to be careful. We established a scholarship in Daniel's name for county kids who build and dream. The first thank you letter arrived with a crooked stamp. I kept it on the refrigerator with a tomato magnet. The cabin changed as I changed. I repaired the roof, planted bulbs, let friends fill the porch with laughter and dishes. Some nights I still wake. Sure, I hear Daniel in the kitchen, cabinet doors soft, the kettle lid tapping. I sit up, breathe, and let the quiet answer. Justice didn't give me my son back. It gave me a place to stand and a way to carry his name. When neighbors stop by with mail or news, they glance at the repaired porch and nod, as if the upright boards themselves remembered how to hold us. When the wind moves through the birches and the roof holds, I know what I inherited. Not a cabin, not money. I inherited the refusal to be small. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.